Alrighty, sorry about the delay. Ooh, 5 minutes on the dot. That's not too shabby. Just give me another second here as I move some stuff around. Getting comfy. Where'd I put that? There it is. Alright, so yeah, today will be the... Oh yeah, welcome back to another installment of Free Read Fridays. I am, to the uninitiated, your intrepid narrator, Fragath, who reads short stories and indeed entire novels aloud. And this will be the final installment of Hellburner by C.J. Cherryh, who is a wonderful author, and I highly recommend her. Not quite everything I've read by her is an absolute banger, but the majority, by quite a large margin, is quite good. So, previously on, quite a lot happened. The situation with Dekker's mother has escalated considerably. It is now pretty much an open secret that Corey Salazar's mother very much, for a number of reasons, and it's like not just her, but kind of like the entire dynastic Salazar clan, uh, they're out for Dekker blood. They want him. They want his mom. They want the entire world to, the entire universe to know their displeasure. Mostly because it's kind of a bad look. Oh, your daughter not only ran away from you, who was incidentally going to be the heir apparent. It's pretty great how important the character of Corey Salazar is, even though we never actually see her in the moment while she's alive. Ever. There's not one time between the two books where she is alive during the plot. It's pretty great. And yet she's pretty much vital to all the proceedings. In fact, her death is like the core linchpin for everything going on around Dekker for 2 books. One of the core linchpins, anyway. There's other stuff going on, but it's kind of important. And yet we never really meet her uh, as an audience. We never really meet her and have her talk to us. We only know what people remember about her, and that's generally from Dekker's perspective and official documentation, and that's not necessarily a full picture of the person, the character. So we don't honestly know much about them, but they're important. So I'm a sucker for stuff like that, where it's like, oh, you're kind of, the characters we're following aren't necessarily important to the core narrative, and yet they are important to the core narrative, but they're not what everybody is going to talk about in a couple generations. A good video game example would be the original Final Fantasy Tactics, where it's nominally being done as kind of like a historical documentary, I guess. A telling of a history, the War of the Lions, and the character you're playing as and following is really, he's very important to everything that's going on, but he's not the guy everybody's talking about. He's not this big hero. He's not, his name isn't plastered over everything. He doesn't become famous, but he's kind of this background mover and shaker for everything that goes down. I almost prefer it where the characters are just not relevant to the proceedings, but they sort of intersect with those proceedings. It's kind of what C.J. Cherryh has done with these 2 books. She does that actually fairly frequently. This isn't the only time she'll do that. Down Below Station is kind of close, where a lot of the main cast, I put in air quotes, that we follow in Down Below Station isn't necessarily central to the major events that go down. They're there, they orbit those events, but they're not necessarily like, it's not like Conan. It's not like Luke Skywalker or anything, although Luke Skywalker kind of starts out ancillary and then becomes such. You get what I mean. Bad example. Good example? Good, bad example. Um, Saitine, on the other hand, is sort of, here's these central characters. They are, in fact, central, not all of them, to the core developments, but you have to kind of learn what the status quo was to understand why they're relevant. And you kind of learn that over time. But in any case, what happened previously on? Gosh. So yeah, the situation with Dekker's mother and Miss Salazar has escalated drastically. Um, let's see, Pori is. Oh, right, there was the assassination attempt on Dekker's crew, uh, which failed because they got bumped to a different time slot, and the pod they were going to take gets sabotaged. And the people who were in it don't die, which is great. But we do finally identify who did done it, and they were literal who. They're just like, who's this person? Oh, they're like a tech somewhere who's been inserted from from somewhere else, and they're actually like a murder machine and an assassin, a saboteur. And nope, literally no idea who they are. We haven't been introduced to them as an audience. They're just there. It's like, oh shit, and it's kind of like, oh, the enemy could be anyone, kind of thing. We don't know how deep this goes, which is what Pori and Graf say. It's like we really don't know how deep this goes. So what we need to do is we need to take all our important operations off of Sol 2 and put them with fleet, like actual fleet vessels. So that is where we are now. Is there's final exercises that are going to prove the viability of this Hellburner program, how it is currently set up, are about to go down, and they're going to go down uh, attached to fleet vessels. Alrighty. So yeah, this will be the final installment. I don't know how long this is going to go. It's not going to be super long. Um, that's kind of the sacrifice I had to make if I wanted this to be, because it was either going to be previous stream was going to be much longer, or this one was going to be even shorter than it is. It was going to be like, oh, I could keep going last week. And it's like, oh, but then you'd have like only one chapter to read, and you'd be done in like 15 minutes, and then you'd be like, welp, that was fun. See you later. So we made them both shorter than usual. All right. So without further ado, I'll get cracking now that I've yammered for 8 minutes. 8 minutes about mostly nothing. So let's get cracking. This will be fun. And brace yourself. I'm probably going to be sweating by the end of this. I don't know about you guys. That's what happened to me at the end of Heavy Time. So it's just like I got to the end of that. I'm like, you know, I'm panting out here because everything goes down. Okay. Chapter 17. Hit it, hit it, hit it! Breathless dive down the hand lines for the seats. One, two, three, four. In place. Switches up. Launch. Surreal burst of static while the screens and the VHUD spieled numbers and lines. Shit! From Ben. You couldn't cure him, or Sal, and there wasn't a miracle. They'd screwed the first run, the second, and the third, but damn, Meg thought with half a neuron to spare, it felt better of a sudden. Wasn't garbage she was screening, it was starting to shape itself. Objective wasn't there. God, intelligence gaff! Time to sweat. Ben was on it, logicking his way for the current location. Deck said, "What the hell?" And Ben confirmed a fire zone. Virtual ordnance blasted out into virtual reality, and she figured, yes. Got it, got it, got it. Watch that, mother. Fan of junk in the carrier path. Deck repositioned and gave Sal the window on a roll to the main objective, and Meg input him the latest calc in long vision, new definition to the hostile fire paths he was ready to see, more precise positions she was inputting to Sal and to him. Feeling too good, too damn good. You didn't cut a rip like that, couldn't sustain it. Couldn't get overconfident. The damned sim kept throwing them targets and you couldn't believe you were getting them. Effin' sim had to be playing with them. Couldn't go on this way. She was the only one in the crew who had time to worry. Worry was the job description, taking the long view, mission objective, degree of criticality, sight and target, sight and target. Priority was seen to. Ride home couldn't be this shit. Whole list of hits. It had felt too good all the way through. And Dekker shook his head, looking at the outcome, all of them gathered around the table, getting the same news. Objective achieved. Path cleared. Flock of surprises locked and taken out. Too soft, Ben muttered. Too soft, this thing. I don't like it. It's not supposed to fall down like this. Dekker rocked his chair on its hinge, propped a knee against the table, and surveyed his crew, the chart table with its windowed displays. Not the stuff they'd worked with in the station, not the hard plastic chairs and the scrub boards and the antique display system. Anything they wanted, Pori said, and for himself he still had crises of disbelief. And the moments of slipping reality, like this one, that showed him faces he knew with reactions that just weren't wrong. Pete and Ellie and Falcone riding in the cockpit with them an hour ago, if he wanted to be spooked about it. But that wasn't really what had happened. The carrier had that tape lab down and the corridor. Whoops. The carrier had that tape lab down the corridor. I don't know why I'm having trouble with that. But that wasn't really what had happened. The carrier had that tape lab down the corridor, the way the carrier had a lot else it hadn't let out, and his crew spent hours there. But they didn't drug deep anymore. They didn't need to. That was the story from the tape techs. Done was done, and their sessions were simply reaffirming the synced reactions, making sure, Meg said, they didn't pick up any bad habits in live practice. Live practice. Hell of a way to word it, considering. They ran the sims in the prototype itself up to 4 hours a day. Its VHUD and instruments linked real-time to the carrier boards and the sims library, thanks to what Ben called the effin' difference between the UDC's EIDAT and the fleet statin tech. Ben seemed personally vindicated in that. What it all meant, he wasn't sure, but it ran. And they did. Not the first time. Damned sure. The screw-up had been what Meg called egregious and Sal called words he'd never heard. Until this sim run. This run, he looked at the result and the fact that Ben had psyched and relocated target right... Had... What? Oh, that's why. This run, he looked at the result and the fact Ben had psyched that relocated target right. Wow. I'm having a hard time today. Give me a sec. This is not how I wanted this to go. It's the way the line break is being done. It's really blowing my mind. Okay. This run, he looked at the result and the fact that Ben had psyched that relocated target right and laid the probability fan right over the son of a bitch, dead center. That was a fluke, but Ben swore he'd had a good hunch, which was what Ellie had used to say. Same words. That was a spook out too. But it was another fluke. The cockpit wasn't haunted, and his crew didn't see spooks in the mirror. He slept with Meg with no illusions that it was Pete Fowler. Hell if, Meg would say. You didn't confuse one with the other. And that still wasn't what worried him. It was what Ben said. It wasn't supposed to fall down this easy. They were out here on no other reason than keeping him away from the media. He told himself that once a day, and he managed to relax and worry about Mitch and Almarshad, who were the ones in jeopardy. Still catching glitches. And the crew who was dogging it and trying to come up from scratch and a couple of total disasters pulled 100%er? He'd thought he knew the answers. He'd eased off, kicked back, taken it for granted he was just going to steer while everything was going to while everything was going to go to hell, and they started handing him stuff that fit together. I'm going to repeat that that paragraph because I mangled it. It's actually a whole sentence. He'd thought he knew the answers. He'd eased off, kicked back, taken it for granted he was just going to steer while everything was going to go to hell, and they started handing him stuff that fit together. Adrenaline had come up. Hold It Steady had become tracking on this last run. He was still hyped and on his edge, and he hadn't been this alive, down to the nerve ends since he'd screwed the sim. You knew all along something was wrong with our setup, Ben kept insisting. And by comparison, now it wasn't wrong, and he couldn't sit still and couldn't help remembering how it felt to be 100% on and right. With a crew he cared about, damn it, more than he'd ever cared about human beings in his life, and too damn many deaths and too many lost partners, with a chance to make runs they'd plotted, the way the UDC hadn't let them do it, and that perfect run lying on the table saying, can't do it twice, complete fluke, can't pull it off again. System can't be that perfect. Something's wrong. His gut was in knots, and his suspicion began to be, in 2 blinks of an eye, and the work of an overhyped brain, that it could be working because his team had come in with minor experience, something the lofty shepherd types with their fancy tech hadn't had, or the tape off his dead partners worked, and Pori hadn't given up when they'd had to downgrade the crew to basics. It wasn't basics anymore. They'd either pushed the sim to the limit, or it had lied to them. And he didn't put that past Pori. He didn't put anything political past Pori, if he wanted to prove something to some committee in charge of finance. They were on the damned list. That was what. They always had been. That son of a bitch had jerked him sideways and just kept going with his crew. What was it? A confidence building exercise? Another damned psych out for more damned political reasons? He felt sick at his stomach. You all right, Deck? He looked at Meg, realized everybody was looking at him. Deck, Ben said, you aren't spooking on us, are you? He shook his head solemnly. It's August 8th, Ben. Huh? Sal said. Meg frowned. But Ben said, it better be, Moonbeam. It'd effin' better be. Yes, sir, Graff said, at the table, hands folded, looking straight at 2 very anxious senators and a busy background of senatorial aides. There was a committee. Inevitably, if there was a glitch, there was a committee, thank God, currently meeting at Sol 1, in the comfort of Class 1 accommodations. It wanted answers, and this was the forerunner, the shockwave. Why is a junior lieutenant left in command of this base? What in hell does your base commander think he's doing taking that carrier out? We give you the authority you ask for, and immediately the program goes to hell in a handbasket, while the officer in charge removes a carrier and declares he's going to test, without notifying the UDC or the Joint Committee, with a highly controversial figure aboard, conveniently unavailable to an ongoing investigation, while a distorted version of the whole damn training program leaks to the media? What kind of circus are you running here? His stomach was in knots. He missed certain of the references. Demar and Saito had advised him certain things to say, certain points to make, the direction he should go with these men. But Demas and Saito didn't know one truth he knew. Neither did Pori, and neither did the captain. Sir, he began on that track, with all respect, I deny that the breach was in our security. Are you suggesting the UDC leaked it? What about Dekker's phone call to Sol 1? What about other phone calls from other fleet personnel? He hoped to hell there wasn't a recorder going. Let me explain, sir. Fleet personnel are contained in a security cocoon within the former administrative apparatus. Our personnel are issued cards which do not work with civilian accesses, which cannot access basecom or internal phone system without going through FleetCom, which is physically aboard the carriers, if there were anyone outside this facility for them to call, nearer the belt. The one exception was Dekker, who— They began to interrupt, and he kept going. Who made his only call to his mother in my office, on my authorization, and I recorded the call in its entirety in case any question arose about that contact. The UDC system is run through Basecom, which is linked by other means to Central Station. Station Central, sorry. Those are the principal routes information can take. There is the shuttle, and there is contact between human beings who can walk from one place to another. If information flowed from this facility, it took one of those routes, on which they had evidence, except a member of a fleet unit had also had accesses he wasn't supposed to have, that Fleet Command didn't know about, which, if he confessed it now, was damning to him, to the fleet, to Dekker's crew at minimum, to the fleet's credibility and their support from the Legislative Committee at worst. While at least some level of the UD... Whoa. Oh, I see. While at least some level... I'm missing the second at. That's my problem. While at least at some level the UDC and potentially the legislature knew about Pollard's security clearance, and might possibly know he'd somehow retained system access, if Pollard himself weren't under higher orders. God, he should never have held his information source secret from Pori. Never. I suggest you use the channels you have to find out what's going on, Lieutenant. Somebody in your command with real authority had better get his ass into this station, find out where the leak is, and get this program off the evening news. You're public as hell. Reporters are demanding to come over here in herds. We've got a very fragile coalition that worked hard to give you what you asked for. And let me tell you very bluntly, Lieutenant, if anything goes wrong with this rumored upcoming test, you've lost the farm. You cannot disavow another failure. Your captains can't pass the buck to junior officers. Do you understand that? Am I talking to anyone who remotely understands the political realities of this situation? Yes, sir, I do understand. No temper. Let's try that again with less temper. Yes, sir, I do understand. No temper. I am 38 unapparent years of age, sir, and older than that as you count time. I was in command of this base during the last hearings. I was lately the director of personnel in this program. I am currently in charge of this facility and the testing program, and of the investigation, and we do have an answer, at least to what happened to Jamil. Woo. Ah. I was in command of this base during the last hearings. I was lately the director of personnel in this program. I am currently in charge of this facility and the testing program, and of the investigation. And we do have an answer, at least to what happened to Jamil Hosseini and his crew. He reached in his pocket and held up a yellow plastic washer. This caused the so-called accident. He had their attention, at least. How? Operations records showed a hang-up in an attitude control. This plastic washer turned up to block the free operation of the yoke. In a null-G facility, you may know, maintenance has to be extremely careful to log and list and check every part, down to the smallest screws and washers, that they take into the facility. These are experienced null-G workers. We don't know by those records how long this little part has been there, whether it was there from the time the pod was assembled, and it by total accident floated over a course of years undetected into the absolutely most critical position it could take in the control system, or whether it was placed there recently. Sabotage, in other words. We view it as more than suspicious. Paul Dekker was assigned to that pod. So we've heard. How much have you heard? Maybe you damn well better tell us what there is to hear. We hear Dekker was assigned there and pulled at the last minute. Again. Why? How? By my order as Chief of Personnel. I made a routine final check on the crew stats. They were coming out of a period of orientation and lab sims. I felt we might be rushing it in terms of fatigue levels. A stand down under those circumstances is routine. Routine, except that this was the time his replacement crew was going into sims with him. Except that the same individuals we suspect of sabotage had access to that area. Civilian employees. Dekker's given a positive ID on one of them as guilty of assault in the last so-called accident. We're talking about deliberate sabotage and premeditated murder committed on Dekker. With what motive? I doubt it was personal. We've 2 employees of Lendler Corp under surveillance. We don't know all their contacts yet, but they had access on both occasions. Frowns. Can you prove anything? We're developing a case, but you see the problem we've been working against. Your security is supposed to be on top of things. People come and go where they like here. Is that the way it works? People with security clearances, yes, sir. In this case, clearances granted by the UDC, interviewing people on Earth, where we have no screening apparatus. We're reviewing the systems and the clearances, but there are 11,338 civilians on B-Dock, hired by the UDC and overseen by various offices. We're naturally giving Lendler Corp a higher priority in our review, but that doesn't mean information can't go out of here through another route. Meanwhile, Dekker is unavailable. He is unavailable. And you have no proof of this sabotage. Their access, Dekker's testimony, the washer, circumstantial evidence placing them in the area. You know what that's worth. A good reason not to let out what we know or make charges we can't substantiate. We're gathering evidence. Meanwhile, these purported saboteurs are at work on this station. Yes, sir. Of necessity, they are. And Paul Dekker's out there on that carrier. Is he in any way involved in the upcoming test? Certainly he'll be in observation and advisement. All crews have that assignment during a run. Whether he'll be assigned to the run or not, that's dependent on evaluations. He can't be the one to take the controls. That name can't be prominent in this program. Have you no comprehension? Senator, political decisions in crew choice caused the last disaster to this program, and I can't believe I'm hearing this all over again. I can't believe what I'm hearing from the junior command officer on this base. I can't believe your persistence in putting this man into the glare of publicity. Let me make it clear to you, Lieutenant, careers are going down in flames if there's a second disaster. We've backed you, we've delivered votes in the JLC, we've patched together the coalition that gives you what you asked for, and damn you, you serve us up Dekker for a witness to sabotage, and Dekker for the representative of your program, and leak to the press while you're developing a case you daren't bring to court. Are you aware what's happening on Earth? Are you aware of the firebombing at the EC headquarters? Are you aware of the bill pending in the committee? The extradition bill? Yes, I'm aware of it. And both acts of sabotage were aimed at him, by people who didn't even know him. This is no personal grudge on the part of the saboteurs, Senator. It's politically motivated murder, the same as the substitution that killed his crew was politically motivated, by people who may not have known where their orders came from. Now we have another coalition, as I understand it, part of which is working for this bill, but someone else clearly doesn't want him in court. Somebody in a position to obtain security clearances wants him dead. And if we break the Lendler case into the open right now, it's going to be a string that reels more and more information into the spotlight. It's as explosive as the Dekker case, and for identical reasons. That's why we haven't expelled these individuals. We know where they are. We suspect who they work for. Temper. Saito had warned him. He got it under control. He faced the senators and the busily note-taking aides with a cold stare, and saw anger and consternation on both senatorial faces. I also want to know, he said, how this exact information about Dekker's being pulled from the sim got to the Joint Committee. Was it out of Stockholm? Silence for a moment. The other senator said, harshly,
Through the media, Lieutenant, not the way we prefer our briefings.
Haven't you the power to find out those sources?
No, we haven't. There are laws.
To cover illegal activity? I find that incredible.
We want to know who made this decision to test. Is there a test, or is this whole maneuver a cover for this Dekker person?
There assuredly will be a test.
With Dekker's crew?
Possibly.
Let me tell you what this looks like to us. It looks like a do-or-die proposition, a harebrained go-for-broke, damned stupid risk on your senior captain's perception that the fleet's losing prestige in Europe, and your facility here is shut down. We can't get you another ship to wreck, Lieutenant. We can't continue our support in the face of this stupid risk of lives and equipment.
Senior captain? Mazian? The program is not shut down, sir. If you perceive that, you've been misled.
The simulators are wrecked. You're vulnerable to sabotage. You're sending out crews who aren't ready.
No, sir. I'm delighted to report that all necessary equipment is functioning. There's been no hiatus in the program. All our crews are at work, including the UDC teams integrated with ours. A silence. Doubt, curiosity, and deep offense. He had his own doubts of these men Saito called essential and friendly and to be trusted with the truth, these fools who wouldn't so much as talk to Saito because Saito wasn't a command officer and Saito wasn't in charge.
This doesn't agree with our information.
I hope I have better news then, sir. Our crews are keeping schedules. We are bringing we are bringing our other senior crews, including UDC personnel, up to mission ready, and when they're ready, they will go. Officially, I know nothing about the upcoming test. I won't know the time until I'm told, but assuredly it will go. And any media attention to this facility will find everything in operation. A modicum of respect, perhaps. A reassessment, a reevaluation what situation they were dealing with, certainly.
Maybe you'd better explain yourself, Lieutenant. With what equipment? With this tape you've come up with? Are we brainwashing our crews?
Crews at mission ready have to practice daily to maintain those skills. With the damage to the Sims, Fleet Command opted to use the Hellburner prototype, patched to the shipboard simulators.
When was this authorized?
The patch?
The shipboard facility. The chamber.
Not chambers, sir, nothing like. I'm not privy to the details, but this equipment we brought with us into the system. But this is equip. Wah, bleh. I'm not privy to the details, but this is equipment we brought with us into the system that we regularly use. Combat crews on standby also have to practice, virtually daily, to keep their edge. We certainly can't stop a carrier's operations or use its physical self for exercises. Naturally, we have the equipment.
Then why in hell haven't we been using it all along? Why spring it now? Why this whole damned accident-riddled program?
Politics, sir. He hoped he kept all satisfaction off his face. As the situation was told to me, we were ordered at the outset, over our captain's explicit protests, to submit our trainees to the UDC systems test protocols, to their aptitude criteria, their rules, and their existing equipment during testing of the prototypes. As I believe, there was a major policy battle over that point in the JLC, and we lost. Total quiet in the room. The clicking of the aide's keys had stopped.
You never said explicitly, the other senator put in, that you had the equipment.
There was some fear, Graff said, that the UDC might use its position to demand control of that equipment. In a situation in which we are not to this hour solely in control of communications system accesses, in which we've had sabotage, attempted murder of our personnel, assignment of flight personnel on criteria purely ideological in nature, plus the security breach, we are trusting your discretion on this point, and we trust that there will not be another leak. What we train on is a very dearly held piece of information. If our enemy knows what equipment we have, we are, in the vernacular, screwed. We protested, through every channel we trusted, that the station facilities here are 150 years old, with maintenance problems that eat up funds for improvements we asked for. The decision to put the rider training into the hands of the UDC, to use Lendler's data conversion system for the pods in the first place, was, as I understand, a purely political decision. We asked to review the software. We were not trusted to make that input. We were not trusted. Another silence. An angry silence on both sides. But it wasn't productive anger. Graff shifted back in his chair. I'm not a diplomat. My captain left other officers here who are. But they aren't command track by UDC rules, so I pass their word on to you. As for the operational crews of all the ships, you gave us a requirement to have carriers on standby to defend this system. And I can tell you, with absolute certainty, I would be grossly irresponsible to take that carrier's controls after months of total stand down. We're in constant training. All ops crews and staffs are in training during any stand down. And the UDC has never provided carrier control sims. It's certainly no secret.
Where did you obtain this other equipment?
Anger. Still a genuine offense, and he answered with careful exactness. I haven't been on that carrier, and I honestly don't know. And I honestly don't know the source.
Where would you expect that carrier to obtain it?
The black market.
Whose black market?
The question seemed naive. The one out there, sir. Outside this solar system. There's very good equipment available.
I find this outrageous. Union equipment? Is that story true?
We have manufacturers. We're not primitives looking for Earth's expertise. My God, Senator. We provided the designs that are making your corporations money.
Are you using Union equipment?
Senator, we don't look for the label. If it works, if it's better, we use it. If we can get our hands on Union side equipment, we're delighted, and they'd be extremely upset if they knew it. They don't want us using their programs.
Are you creating tape?
Of course. They're creating tape over in the UDC, in TI. They're creating tape in Houston for physical rehab patients.
You know what we're asking. These people with their fingers on the fire button. Are you saying, Lieutenant, that the tape training your crews are being given is being adjusted to the personality of some single individual, and among those individuals may be Paul Dekker?
Physical reaction tape doesn't affect personality. That's a complete misapprehension.
It's a public perception. Truth doesn't matter. Public perception does. You're going to use a rab agitator, a man linked to riots in Bonn and Geneva.
He held his voice steady and his hands from clenching. A young man who knows nothing about riots in Bonn, who was qualified for a pilot's license before his enlistment, which one would hope the ECSAA doesn't do for criminals.
Oh, come on, Lieutenant. The ECSAA licensed every miner in the belt.
Dekker was a pusher pilot at Sol 1 in your own space by your certifications. He's an outstanding young officer who's distinguished himself by his work and his dedication to this program. And if he meets mission criteria, he will be a source for training material. Skill.
He's too politically sensitive. It's already too public. God, why do you people persist in shoving this man in our faces? Are you actively challenging the legislature?
He shook his head. Your creativity, sir, with all respect. Any choice made on political and not operational grounds reduces this ship's chances of survival. If this test fails, the EC has no alternative and no further resources to offer us. I'm authorized to tell you we will have no choice at that point but to pull out entirely and abandon our defense of the mother world. That's precisely where it stands.
Damn it!
Yes, sir, I agree with you. But no one but our predecessors had a choice. Things kept on surreal so far as things sorry. Things kept on surreal so far as Dekker was concerned. Time trip to a place he'd never been, and the little things got to you. The moment in the shower you couldn't remember where you were. The split second during mission prep the whole scene seemed part of the station, not the carrier. Nothing felt safe or sure. You ran the prep, you ran the sims, you scribbled away on your plans, you ran the sims, and every once in a while they gave everybody a day down, and you could put your feet up, play cards, and enjoy a light beer, because the carrier pilots were using the equipment, but the whole thing cycled endlessly. You could believe at times you were in the war, the other side of the hinder stars. Or in Sol Station's carpeted corporate heart, where orderlies served you food you didn't even recognize, arranged in pretty patterns on the plates. Your bed turned up made, your clothes turned up clean, and the bar, when it was open, served free drinks. Wasn't so bad a life, you could get to thinking. But debt for this had to come due, either to Pori or to God or to somebody. Hit 200%ers back to back, and he started thinking, the Sims are lying to us. They're jerking us around, trying to give us confidence. They want their damn theory to work. They're targeting the tape they're giving us at the exercises. That's why we're getting scores like that. That's why it's not happening to the other teams. Some damned fool in an office somewhere could believe a lie and put us out there when it's all lab stuff that looks good. Jack, what are you guys having for breakfast? Call from the end of the narrow bleh, call from the end of the narrow room down by the display. Damn, they'd posted the scores. Lot of guys went and had a look. Hell, he groaned. But it wasn't ragging this time. It was a rueful shake of heads and a, Deck, looks like you got the run. Not yet, he said to Almarshad. No, I mean you got the run. You're posted. Mitch is back up one. We're two. Half a point between us. Oh, wait, that's Almarshad. Sorry. No, I mean you got the run. You're posted. Mitch is back up one. We're two. Half a point between us. Blood went to his feet. He sat there with his crew who weren't celebrating, who just looked at him, and got up as Mitch and Almarshad came over and congratulated him, not looking happy, not taking it badly either. It was too serious for that, too damned uncertain for that. Not a thorough surprise, Mitch said. Sounds like we're headed for girl tape for sure. Ragging it a little close to the edge, that. But he took Mitch's offered hand, and Meg let him lay a congratulatory and Meg let him lay a congratulatory hand on her shoulder after. Katie, class job, you guys. Seriously. No, that's wrong. Damn it.
Damn it.
Uh, Katie, class job, you guys. Sincerely. There we go. Meg looked as if she'd swallowed something strange. Sal just looked smugly satisfied and gave Mitch a kiss on the cheek. Ben said, I can't believe this. I can't believe this. What am I doing here? Oh, Ben. What are you doing there, Ben? Chapter 18. His mother had said often enough, "You don't care, Paul. You just don't care about people. There's got to be something basic missing in you." Maybe there was. Maybe he didn't feel things other people did. Maybe machines were all he came equipped to understand, all that was ever going to make sense to him, because he couldn't stay away from them. He honestly couldn't live without doing this. He couldn't turn it loose. When he was away from the ship, he could think reasonably about it, and know that it was a cold way to be, and that if he could be something different and he could be back in the belt with people he cared about, doing nothing but mining, he could be happy. He'd been happy there. He could have been again, in the right company. But when he got up here in Null G, in the rider loft, with the 4 Hellburner locks staring him in the face, and the ship out there behind number 1, then everything was different. Every value and priority was revised. The ship was a presence here, was waiting to be alive. And he was. In a way, he wasn't in the whole rest of his life. He was scared down in the gravitied quarters, scared out of his reason, and he realized he'd gotten everyone who cared about him in one hell of a mess. But up here, he knew at least why he'd made the choices he had, right or wrong. He knew why he'd kept going, and why the pods made him afraid. Just that nowhere else was this. Nowhere else had the feel this did. It didn't altogether cure being scared, but it put the fear behind him. This was where he would have been on that day, damn it, except for Tanzer, except for Wilhelmsen being put in the wrong place at the wrong time. It felt as if his whole life had gone offline since then, and he was just now picking up again where it should have been, with the people he should have had. Time that had frozen on him was running again. The mission was in his pocket, and right now the only thing he was honestly afraid of up here was being pulled from the mission again. But nobody in command would mess with him. Not now. It wasn't Tanzer in command. He was too valuable. He was somebody, finally, that people couldn't shove aside, when all through his life people had been trying, and they couldn't do that again. If he did this, if he lived through it, if he made good on everything he'd promised.
Dekker,
Pori's voice, echoing over the speaker, making his heart jump. Sir?
mission dump has gone to your files. We have incoming.
Cold hit his gut. Raw panic negated every reasoning. It couldn't happen. It wouldn't happen. It wasn't true.
I said incoming, Dekker. Get your ass into library. Fast!
He grabbed a new grip on the zip line for the lift and hit the inner lift wall. Damn the drilled reaction. He didn't believe it. Damn, he didn't believe it.
We're not betraying position,
The voice from the speaker said.
we're allowing 40 minutes. That's all we can allow for library access, plot, and confirm. Get with it.
You're lying, sir. This is a test run. This is a damn test. You don't have to pull this on us. Silence from the lift speaker. Lift crashed into the frame, jolted him and the whole compartment around to +1G, and he caught a grip on the rail. Damn you! He yelled at the incommunicative comm. Damn you to hell, Commander! Sir, where's this incoming? But nothing answered him. Sorry about that. Somebody tried to use my magic box to communicate with me. My tricorder, as it were. I swear to you, it wasn't our guys, Villy said on the way to the officers' conference room, to a meeting Graf would as soon have skipped. That's official from the colonel. He didn't leak it. Nobody on staff did that he can trace. That's what he wants me to say.
What do you say? Graff asked.
He's not lying.
Villy didn't sound offended by the question. Villy's eyes, crinkled around the edges with a lot of real-time years, were honest and clear as they always had been. You wanted to believe in Alejandro Villanueva the way you wanted to believe in sanity and reason in the universe. But Villy quoted Tanzer at him, and it was suddenly Villanueva's own self Graff began to worry about now, about the man who, over recent weeks, he'd worked with as closely and as cooperatively as he worked with his own staff, sorting out the tempers, the egos, the simple differences in protocols. They'd mixed the staff and crews in briefings and in analysis sessions. They'd given alcohol permissions in rec on one occasion, holding the Marine Guards in reserve. And nobody'd been shot, nobody'd been taken to the brig, and no chairs had left the floor. More than that, they had a remarkable sight ahead of them in the hall. That was Rios and Wojak in UDC that was Rios and Wojak in UDC fatigues, and Paulie in fleet casuals and station boots, engaged in conversation that involved a clipboard waved violently about. No combat. Sanity. Cooperation, if a thin one. There was a secret, highly illegal betting pool going amongst the crews, odds on which crew was going to draw the test run, and a sizable pot, from which Fleet Police said the UDC crews leaning heavily towards solid, by-the-book Almarshad, and the fleet tending to split between Mitchell and Almarshad, and no few still betting on Dekker as the long shot. He hadn't taken the action on that pool that regulations demanded. Sorry, my brain lost context there for a sec. Let me reread that. He hadn't taken the action on that pool that regulations demanded. Villy hadn't. More remarkable, Tanzer hadn't, if Tanzer knew, which he personally doubted. Tanzer didn't know everything that was going on these days. Villy directly admitted there were topics he didn't bring up with Tanzer, and it was too much to hope that Tanzer had learned anything about dealing with the shepherds or changed his style of command. It was Villy's discretion he leaned to. He had been leaning to it, maybe more than he should have. Maybe he'd only been naive, looking too much for what he hoped, and too little for the long years Tanzer had built up a network in this place. Fact was, same as he'd told the committee, there were too many chances for leaks, too many contractors, too many technicians, too many stations maintenance personnel with relatives in Sol 1, or, God knew, in Buenos Aires or Paris. It was worth their jobs to talk. The workers knew that. They'd signed the employment agreements, but they were human beings, and they had personal opinions, not always discreetly. Shuttle was coming in, approaching dock. They might be rid of the senators, but they had reporters incoming. Fleetcom had broken the news of the impending test. The senators had no wish to get caught here. They were packing to leave, had their last interviews with the Lendler personnel today. God hope they didn't give anything away. And the shuttle would be at least 6 hours in maintenance and loading, latest report. None too soon to be rid of the lot, in his book.
We have any new data at the hearings at 1?
On the hearings at 1?
Villanueva asked him.
Anything from the JLC or the technical wing?
Nothing. Not a thing yet. Steps behind them in the hall, rapid, as they reached the briefing room. Late arrival, Graff interpreted it, turned to glance and met an out-of-breath Trev out of Fleetcom. Evans handed him a printed note. It said, "Reporters are on the shuttle. All outbound system traffic on hold. Test is imminent." Hell, he thought. And why didn't the captain warn us? FSO has to have known. FSO has to have signed the press passes.
Reply, sir?
None I want in writing. Tell Com 1 I said so, and what in hell. And what in hell. Those words. Stat.
Yes, sir, Trev said, and cleared the area at max speed.
Which left Villy's frown and lifted eyebrow. Reporters on the inbound shuttle, he told Villy. The test's been announced. I don't know by whom. System traffic is stopped. We're stuck with the shuttle, the senators, and the reporters. Villy's look couldn't be a lie. They've been inbound for 3 damn days. This isn't a leak. This is a damn publicity setup. What kind of game are you guys running over at FSO? That's what I'm asking FleetCom. Bloody hell, what are they doing to us?
Damn mess.
Meg muttered in the ready room, looking at the lighted plot screen. Deck was a bundle of nerves, holding to the hand grip beside her, and memorizing that chart with the only drug training he'd ever had, the bit that helped you focus down and retain like and mm, yeah, my tongue not obeying my commands. Holding to the hand. Deck was a bundle of nerves, holding to the hand grip beside her and memorizing that chart with the only drug training he'd ever had, the bit that helped you focus down and retain like crazy. Ben was swearing because he hadn't got his specific numbers out of the carrier. Out of carrier nav. Wow. Ben was swearing because he hadn't got his specific numbers out of carrier nav yet. Sal was talking to the ordnance clerk, and Meg muttered her own numbers to voice comp, while suit up techs tugged and pulled at her in intimate places. You didn't even do that basic thing for yourself. You just memmed charts fast as you could and talked to the systems chiefs and techs who you hoped to God had done their job. The helmet came down over his head, and other hands twisted the seal. 360-degree real HUD came active. VoiceLink did. She evoked her entry macro that prepped her boards long distance, dumped her touch, her patterns, her mem marks on the plot screen firepath to the Hellburner systems. Mitch's crew and Almarshad's were in flight control, 2 beats of argument between them whether it could possibly be real, whether they might actually have a real space system entry launched at high V from far out, or whether intelligence reports foretold something about the drop in. The consensus was test, setup, but they couldn't take it as a test run, didn't dare believe the ordnance that would come at them was anything but real. The sketchy fire track was running right past Earth's moon, not the kind of thing Sol system traffic control was going to like, and that meant a wide open track with a shot at Earth if they didn't get a fast intercept on that incoming ship. The doomsday scenario. They could lose the whole Motherwell in less than 10 minutes. That was what shaped up on their data. Billions of people. All life on Earth. The enemy wouldn't do that. They were human beings. But life in the belt and the gossip from fleet instructors argued there were minds out there more different than you ever wanted to meet. And you could never, ever bet on them doing the logical. Siren went off. The board and take hold. Hell! Ben cried, because they were going. There was no more time. The carrier was going to hit the mains, and the next input they got was going to be off carrier ops. The carrier's long scan/com team that was their data supply and their situation monitor. Them and the backup teams doing her job for the 60 minus seconds it was going to take them to board and belt. She grabbed the dismount line behind Dekker, in crew entry order, hindmost, and hung on as the door slammed wide and the line meshed with the gears. Hell of a jerk on the arm. You held on, was all, as the singing line aimed you for the mounting bars at the hatch. 1, 2, 3, 4, tech lines ringing empty. The Hellburner's tech hatch open, but receiving no one. Carrier technical crew shouted good wishes at them as they and one after the other hit the stop, pile-up of hand grips. Inertia carried them in. She hit the cushions last, heard the hatches shut when she flipped the toggle, both ports, confirm on the seal by on-panel telltales as she was snapping the only manual belt. Second toggle, and they went OPSCOM, linked with the carrier, sending and receiving a blitz of electronic information. "We're go," Deck said, and instantaneously the carrier mains cut in with a solidity that shoved them harder than the pods ever had, 10 plus in a brutal backs downward acceleration. Carrier was outputting now, making EM noise in a wavefront an enemy would making EM noise in a wavefront an enemy would eventually intercept in increasing Doppler effect, and to confuse their long scan they were going to pull a pulse, half up to FTL, and abort the bubble, on a heading for the intercept zone. That was the scary part. That was the time, all sims aside, that the theoretical high V became real, .332 light, true Hellride, with herself for the comm node that integrated the whole picture. They tranked you down for jump. They didn't for this move. They told you what it was going to be. They pulled disorientations and sensory assaults, and learned the MEM techniques from the Starship crew, and hoped you could get the threads back when you came out. But meanwhile, you just kept talking to the computer and the carrier and moving your markers with the joystick, laying the strike and the strategy as if you were seeing it tamely on the light table instead of on monitors, with numbers and grids floating in glowing colors. Reality became hyperextended vision into mathematical futures, chaos of nature, two intersecting presence cones of human action that had to narrow at a proximity to Luna that was truly harrowing. Hard to breathe. The flight suit squeezed the ribs in efficient pulses. Oxygen flowed. Damned sure not the pod this time. This was real. This was moment that the brain skipped. Moment that they weren't anywhere, and all the data left the brain void. A voice said, like God, "Stand by SEP, Hellburner." She recalled that procedure, scanned her crew's LS, TAC, and STAT data, glowing cold at the upper periphery of her mid-range vision, and said, mechanically as any machine, "SEP go, that's go, go." Bang! "We have absolutely identical interests," Villy said to the gathered reporters, while Graff folded his arm and while Graff folded his arms and leaned against the wall by the door. Captain Villy rested elbows against the podium and said in that voice that had to be believed, "Let me explain where the UDC stands. Yes, there have been problems in the past. As a test crew, in this facility, we've seen ideas that worked and we've seen ideas that didn't. We've worked with a lot of bright-eyed young pilots and techs that came in here all impatient to be trained in equipment we ran when it didn't have all the buttons they put on it. Who never gave a damn about what we knew so long as all the buttons worked. That's the truth. And I'll tell you, having the future operational crews shoved in here to be part of the testing procedures, that's been a hell of an adjustment for us. But the fleet did call this one right. The physiological demands of this equipment are hell, and the crews that can fly this baby are going to be so scarce in the general population that they're probably going to give some of us a chance to be honest working crew. Tidbit of real news. Graff pricked up his ears, saw Optech's record. Uh, this is how you know I'm too old and hang around actual LPs for my music collection. Sorry. Tidbit of real news. Graff pricked up his ears, saw Optech's record lights, like so many blinking eyes among the reporters. They say the other guys have to grow 'em in vats, and 18 years from now we're going to see their hand-raised clone pilots in the cockpits. That 18 years is the lead we have, because they tell us the merchanters that won't take our side won't take Union's side either. Union doesn't have the in-system crews we do. They're a lot more mechanized. Their mining equipment's state of the art. A lot of robots. Their miners sit on big ore collectors. They don't have our antique equipment, and consequently, they never developed a pool of experienced in-system crews like we drew in from our asteroid belt. What about this tape? a reporter asked, out of turn. What about this Union mind tape? It's not Union, Graff said from near the door, and drew an immediate concentration of steady red lights. It's ours, and it works only on the reflexes, a glance left or right at the panels, mathematical formulae and routines. Nothing is organized thought or attitudes. It covers the same kind of memorizations you do in school. He trusted they did such things in schools. These reporters were Earth's equivalent of comm, and he doubted they had any experience in common. He wanted Saito down here, but Saito was on the carrier, where Fleetcom with a test proceeding mandated she be. Dema was knew where. Dema had taken refuge in Ops. He was willing to lay bets. Com said in his ear,
Mission is go 4 with Dekker. Rider is sept. We're coming up in station systems.
I copy, he told the bone mic. I'm on my way to mission control. Reporters were still looking at him. Optek's lenses were all turned his way, and Villy was watching him from the podium. Mission's away, he said, removed the uncomfortable security comm from his ear, and added, with a certain suicidal satisfaction, Team leader is Dekker, and watched all the chaos erupt. All right! Ben sounded finally satisfied with the numbers, and Dekker gave a little breath of relief. A relief that Ben probably wouldn't understand. Smug. That was Ben when he relaxed. But Ben wasn't smug now. He was on and anxious all the way. We just keep running.
Quiet a while, Deck Boy. A real hold steady here. Minimal profile. Just keep us out of their acquisition long as we can. Carrier's gone up ahead, going to fire a decoy and brake hard.
The carrier's vane config showed clear. That was the immediate worry on this maneuver. The carrier was going to pull an axis roll. A thing the size of some space stations was going to do a total reverse, pass them again at close range, rotate a second time, and tail them at a distance.
This is a setup, Meg complained.
We got too many numbers on this, Ben. It's got to be a setup.
Dekker, a murderer? Graff said, tracking past the specs windows of mission control to the profile screens and the working teams and his own trainees at the boards. They'd established the reporters in the viewing area, gotten the senators a secure spot in a VIP observation point, and on the displays in mission control, a situation was unfolding neither party yet comprehended. No, he happens to be the survivor of 3 documented attempts on his life, 2 of which put him in hospital, 1 of which killed Corey Salazar. Not the loudest voice, but the one he chose to hear. That contradicts what Counselor Salazar charges. Probability fans were changing color on the screens, rapidly narrowing. It is, nevertheless, the truth. The evidence against Paul Dekker was fabricated by the identical agencies responsible for covering up a strike-breaking police action that took 17 other lives documented in 2,304 sworn affidavits and complaints. From Belters? Bias dripped from the question, and sharpened focus and temper for a split second. From civilian and military eyewitnesses and victims living and dead in Earth Company records. There are no grounds for the charges against Paul Dekker. They're old history, investigated and officially dismissed when the agencies that made the charges were dissolved by legal action for corruption, wrongful death, and labor abuses. As for the culpable parties, they were relieved of command and stripped of their licenses, but unfortunately that was the only action taken. I suggest you ask Miss Salazar why she's never named them in her pending suit. Why didn't she? I couldn't speculate on her motives. 10 and 20 questions at once. Riot, as reporters a moment ago drifting along the specs wall suddenly elbowed each other to get Optek's pickups to the fore. Let the company raise hell. Let the fleet ship him to the battle zone. Please God, ship him to the zone, away from reporters, cameras, Edmund Pori, and self-serving senators demanding dinner in the VIP observation area. Then someone shouted from the hall, "They're releasing the separation footage!" And bedlam surged in the other direction, reporters trying to get into mission control, jamming in the doorway. Two stayed to ask, "Who authorized this test, Lieutenant?" "Not in my need to know, I'm afraid. In-system traffic near Luna shows lift delayed for 30 minutes on the monitor up there. That has to come from very high levels." "Who can authorize it?" "Sol 1 Station Master, for the lowest level." "If The barrage of questions and dicing of information kept up. He stood there with his gut in knots. It was go now, no likely recall of the rider. Mission parameters were showing on the screens, Doppler transmission from the carrier, and from the rider via the carrier. Course was laid for intercept from the ecliptic, of a zenith system entry shielded from the carrier by Earth's own security zone. Worst case scenario in system defense. Bleh. Worst case scenario in system defense, an attack coming into Earth's vicinity, and not a damned thing on the transmissions to say the case wasn't real. Worse, there was an incoming showing on the one screen his eye knew for real case. Something was inbound, or they'd gotten in-system traffic management to lie, and it didn't. Ever. Ship felt good. Felt good all the way. Zero no calls and zero glitches on the boards. Clean, wide SEP from the carrier, and for a while they would keep the carrier's rate inside its shields, pretending to the enemy that separation was still to come. Attitude assemblies were all answering test calls. Dekker lost himself in the internal config confirms, in the numbers that were the immediate future. Meg was there to tell him where he was. Ben was shaping further future, and Sal was working up the fire path, armaments taking program, talking to Meg's boards, which would talk to his VHUD when the time came. Right now, body sense was expanded into the ship. Time was cut loose and independent of circumstances. The track and the fire points were shaping up further and further into the diagrams spread in his far vision. But he was only generally aware of that. He was seeing that interval as leisurely information building. What? One sec, let me read ahead here. These sentences get long and involved. Leisurely information building minutes. Diving. Leisurely information building minutes. Diving toward a split second high point. Okay. But he was only generally aware of that. He was seeing that interval as leisurely information building minutes, diving toward a split second hype point, where he had to be ready to execute a sequence of immaculately timed moves to confuse the enemy, position the fire platform, and get their asses safely past a line of answering fire scarily close to Luna, with a V that overrode both Luna's pull and the available energy of their own missiles, which was all Sal's problem. They aren't doing anything, the reporters objected with increasing frustration, even anger, and Graff said, finally, with a heart going faster and faster, eyes fixed on the monitors beyond the specs panes. "Oh, yes, they are. They're maintaining output silence. The carrier's doing all the transmission, noisy as it wants to be. They launched something on either side before they braked. One's a decoy, one's the rider, and the rider doesn't want to be seen yet. That's the name of the game. Even we don't know which it is because they haven't told us, and motion hasn't started." Questions broke out, a shouted confusion. "Yes, we have no doubt they're still conscious." Oh gosh, excuse me. I'm so excited I'm getting hiccups. Yes, we have no doubt they're still conscious. See the four dots on the screen? All doing fine. Trajectories were widening their perspective on the screens, and one reporter noticed the obvious. "That-
That's going straight through Luna space. Is that Luna space?
All system traffic suspended. The fire paths will have been cleared and safed."
What if
Clatter, chatter. Why am I reading that as an L? Chatter kept up. Media seemed to abhor a thinking silence. He watched the situation on the screens, thinking, damn, who's feeding them their orders? But he heard no calculations emanating from FleetCom. He suspected the carrier arms comper had primed them for this, set up the incoming and the response. He personally suspected that anything and everything Pori did was with mirrors, but he kept his mouth shut and hoped to God no reporter got onto that question. And the fire paths were damned close to Luna. The reporter was right. They were terrifyingly close, from the viewpoint of civilians not used to starships at entry and exit V. Close, and with a maneuver that, if they did it, damn, it was Russell's star, replayed. Long, long time on a hold steady. Easy to become hypnotized, if not for the nuisance chatter on internal comm. Dekker did the small breathing exercises that kept him aware of time. Nothing but free fall at fractional light, minimal signature. Nothing noisy, no output at all, no input but the passive recept of the carrier and its boards. I just lost my place. I'm sorry. Dekker did the small breathing exercises that kept him aware of time. Nothing but free fall at fractional light, minimal signature, nothing noisy, no output at all, no input but the passive recept of the carrier and its boards that advised them things they couldn't output to see. Couldn't prove it wasn't real was what break it up with more commas, I dare you. Couldn't prove it wasn't real, what they were receiving. You couldn't assume it. Daren't assume it. What we're going to do imminently, Deck Boy, we're about to do a little round the corner shot at this sumbitch. Luna Shadow's your boost point. God, I hope you get it right. Copy that, he muttered.
Do your own job, Ben.
Ordnance up, Sal said.
Meg, Deck, that's your plot points. You copy?
Dots and lines were multiplying in his midvision now, floating in space, designating essential fire points, orientation, mass decrease. Considerable decrease. Hellburner was 90% fuel, engines, ablation surface, and ordnance.
He's got it, Meg said. Here we go, guys. Initiate.
Pulse of the main engines. Missiles launched with a shock through the frame, 1 and 2 away, straight toward the moon. Adrenaline stretched time and distances.
T1.
Ben was saying, calling out the major coordination points. Second pulse, high G RO, intermittent accel and launches directly down their back path toward their carrier, staccato hammer of missiles away, Hellburner's mass diminishing fast. Second RO, braces engaged. Had to hold the track with immaculate numbers. Crossing the carrier fire path now, edge on, minimum profile.
Son of a bitch!
Ben yelled, as the emissions recept picked up launch, but their four missiles had kicked off the frame on the mark, and Dekker swung into his scheduled profile reposition with an instant eighth less mass and a violence that blurred vision.
Track!
Ben yelled at Sal.
Track! Got it, got it, got it!
Sal cried, onto a steady stream of profanity as their chaff gun opened up, down the hostile fire track straight for the incoming.
Burn it!
Ben yelled, and Dekker shoved it to a plus 10.5 instant Gs ahead, on the instant, rotated sideways as they were. Russell's star is just I think it's a military altercation that we the audience don't know about, but Graf was part of. Countered. Graf watched the fire bursts, listened to the dispassionate voice of Fleetcom confirm the intercept. It looked so slow on this scale, so incredibly slow. But his heart knew the speed at which things were moving. His gut was in knots. He wanted his own hands on controls. He wanted that with every breath he took. They were on. God, they were making it. So had Wilhelmsen, this early on. Another reorient and they were still throwing fire. But damn! The lines intersected, and of a sudden, missiles near Luna were off the scope of a sudden. Range safety? Or hostile action?
Test stop,
Came over the speakers.
the test has been terminated. This is Fleetcom Mission Control.
Disaster? Graf felt cold all over. Couldn't have. The pilot was still tracking.
The incoming is confirmed as EC Militia Merchanter Eagle, proceeding at V to maintain effect shields against inert chaff which will not, repeat not, intersect civilian traffic. Luna vectored ordnance was destroyed by the range safety officer. At no time was this ordnance capable of reaching the lunar surface. Technical explanation will follow. The remaining ordnance is being cleared from the area by destruct commands issued by range safety. Rider ordnance trajectories have been computed as intersecting Eagle presence and moment with Eagle presence and moment with 3 major strikes, sufficient to have eliminated the incoming threat. This concludes a successful test of the Hellburner prototype. In-progress system traffic will resume ordinary operations in 15 minutes.
Impossible to hear in the spectator gallery after that. Crews and techs inside mission control were out of their seats, pounding each other on the backs, with a complete disregard of uniform or gender. Damn on! Villy roared from the other side of the spectators. Optexes were going. Reporters were shouting questions. A few of them loudly incensed about the apparent proximity to the moon. God, he just let it go. Gave fragments of answers, how he felt. Damned happy. Had he been nervous? Wanted to be out there, he said, all while tracking on the screens. The celebrations, the communications from Fleetcom telling Hellburner 1 there was no need to brake, the carrier was on direct intercept, and from UDC System Defense saying that lift traffic would resume in areas declared cleared, starting with Alpha Zone, near Earth's atmosphere. Was it an unwarrantable risk to Luna? A reporter wanted to know. He said, tracking on the politics as well as the damned brilliant straight-line shot, in the first place, it was never going to hit the moon. It was moving past the moon faster than it was moving toward it. By the laws of physics, it absolutely couldn't hit the surface. If something had gone wrong with the missiles, they didn't have enough fuel to reach the moon soon enough to hit it. It's absolutely impossible. But they could reach the carrier. The carrier could run into them. The range officer got it well within the safe zone. If it had failed to detonate, there were 2 backup systems. And, I re-emphasize, the ordnance was not infalling Luna, no more than the ship itself was. The arms comper knew exactly what she was doing. She! A reporter pounced on the question, but another shouted, Was it a successful test when the duration was half an hour less than the Wilhelmsen run at a slower speed? The rider eliminated the threat. It had nothing left to shoot at. But there's no it had nothing left to shoot at. There's no point in continuing beyond mission accomplished. But could they have kept going? No doubt whatsoever. And let me point out, they were slower, but their target was moving at system entry speeds. Wilhelmsen's targets were only randoms, from known fire points, nothing this real time. But he gave us data that helped us. It wasn't a pointless sacrifice. Never a pointless sacrifice. Tanzer had just showed up in mission control, Tanzer accepting handshakes of his staff, beyond the sound-dampening specs, and the whole press corps was suddenly trying to figure out how to get to where they weren't going to be admitted. Villy clapped him on the shoulder in passing and escaped the intercepts, while another Optex pickup arrived in his face with, Ms. Salazar has denounced the choice of Paul Dekker as the source of tape for the program and called for the disfranchisement of the fleet. How do you feel about that? My answer? If that incoming had been Union, that ship and that young pilot and crew would have prevented global catastrophe. A single barrage of inert matter falling on Earth at half light would create ecological disaster. Stock answer, stock material. The science people had calced it years ago. He knew not a damned thing about climates, truth be told. A reporter followed up. Earth was not in actual danger. Earth was in deadly danger if that had been a Union ship. But Hellburner demonstrated its ability to deflect any such attack. Their course was right on to intercept with that incoming militia ship. You could see it on the display up there. This was a live ordnance test, but nothing at any time was aimed at Earth or Luna.
What if it went off track?
That's why there are range safety officers. He didn't want to say what he suspected, that if the destruct sequences for the Rider's missiles hadn't been dumped to Eagle's computers by the Sol system buoy on entry, the range safety officer on the ECS-4 had to have a few extremely anxious moments once the shots went around the limb of the moon. That volley had come very close to sending the missiles out of communication with the carrier. But the crew hadn't pulled any punches. No crew could afford to think in those terms. Ever. Lieutenant, do you think... Excuse me. He was getting a burst of new information off FleetCom on the screens and over the PA, and another line of comm flow in his ear from Saito, saying, Panic over much of Europe, assumption the test was real, public reactions yet uncertain. But Mazian was in front of the cameras in Bonn, with pronouncements of what a Union strike would have meant for Earth. Calling Paul Dekker and his crew phenomenally skilled, heroes of Earth's own defense forces, a combined fleet and UDC crew.
Good run. Still room for improvement.
Pori's voice, and Dekker wanted to tell him to go to hell for the trick they'd pulled. Destruct the ordnance, damned right they'd had to. He'd been scared as hell they might hit a friendly ship. But a Belter didn't have ordinary nerves, and he'd not been 100% convinced until they'd gotten the congratulatory communication from FleetCom that it had been the scheduled test. Didn't know what to do with the nerves now. Things were still dragging along, interminable time stretch. Not so hard a job, this run, but that was the problem, wasn't it? You didn't get the hellish repositions and redirects when you were working with Ben and Sal, when your co-pilot was thinking ahead of the pilot's problems so he didn't get called on for those moves. Only one of those shifts he'd had to rip. They'd hyped the V sideways hard after Sal's best shot, and Ben was still muttering about real space feeling real and soreness setting in.
Meg said, We're in the pocket, right in the pocket now, Deck. You don't have to do a thing till the bow shock. Incidentally, compliments from Captain Kreshow on Eagle. He says it was a damn pretty job. His words. Thank you, sir. The team appreciates the compliment. We got a drink offer from his arms compa.
Sounds good, Ben said. Yeah, from Sal. Himself, he wasn't highly verbal, just tracking on the approaching carrier. Ben decided it was a friggin' party, all of a sudden. Sal and Meg have evidently had, and he could strangle Ben. They weren't through until they'd been through the real-time shields. Nothing virtual about it this time. Carrier coming up like a bat behind them. Baudry's showing out. No different than the rider jocks. Except Baudry was carrying multiples of their mass, and when he contemplated Doc after what he'd been through, he felt sweat running on his forehead and a tension cramp knotting on his leg. Knotting his leg. Ugh, not on it. That would be gross. It would be in his leg. Whatever. Meg switched him out of the fleet comm loop to carrier comm, then, the range blip and the docking schematic a total preoccupation in his 360-degree VHUD compression. Carrier Helm talking to him now, wanting his attention, while he left Meg and Ben to watch elsewhere.
Just hold steady and we've got you.
Moment of panic. Hard to shift time perception. It wasn't going fast now. Everything took forever, and a tiny bobble was a disaster. You didn't screw it at this stage. Didn't, please God, didn't.
Bow shock in 43 seconds. Copy that. Go.
He couldn't afford to think they'd done it. Not yet.
That's capture and dock.
Fleetcom's dispassionate voice said.
Thank you, Mr. Dekker. Excellent job.
Graf found himself breathing again. We're going into our checklist. Dekker's voice. The reporters had gotten to recognize it, had picked up on the tension in mission control, and Villy had finally gotten it through. The shift the pilot had to make between nanosecond events and docking at relatively slow docking approach. We had two funerals getting this down pat, Villy muttered. It's no easy. There's no piece of easy the kid's working. Hell of a buffet when you cross the shields. Hell of a buffet. You can tell where my mind is. I'm hungry. I don't think that's the first time I've made that mistake. I'm sorry. It's no piece of easy the kid's working. Hell of a buffet when you cross the shields. Hell of a buffet when you cross the shields. They've got everything here. Mashed potatoes, stuffing, turkey, the works. Another flurry of technical questions. Sorry. Graf looked for an escape, saw the door to the VIP area open, and the two senators walk out. Instant recognition from the press, instant convergence in that direction. Shouts and questions.
We were invited to observe this test,
The senior senator, Caldwell.
to see how the taxpayers' appropriations have been spent. I must say we've had a compelling demonstration of the effectiveness of the technology. Outstanding performance.
JG,
Dimas said in his ear.
Bon. Our suspect did work for Mars Corp.
He ducked for the corridor, deserted Villy and the senators for a small nook near a couple of Marine security guards. Say, he asked the security unit, have we got a case?
I don't know if we have a case, but he has a former close associate in the Federation of Man, and the UDC background check didn't go that deep. He was passed in under Lendler security, and hear this, JG, the UDC took Lendler's word for it. Unquote. All their personnel have to have a clearance. Unquote. Mars Corp is 45% of Lendler's business. The atmospheric softwares for a start.
Bloody hell, he thought. The information had hit his brain. The implications were still finding sensitive spots in his nervous system. Took Lendler's word for it. All their personnel have to have a clearance. Political implications, far beyond the Dekker affair. You're serious?
Mars is threaded all through this, but so is the Federation of Man. Eldon Kent has two cousins in that association. Lendler's records on him are so named classified, which we can't penetrate without filing charges.
Not yet. Not yet. God. Saito cut in on the channel.
JG, the carrier is returning to dock.
We're deep in reporters. Tell the commander that.
I'm sure he knows,
Saito said. Damn, he thought, but he kept it off his face, he hoped, at least. He stood very still for a moment, heard Caldwell saying, inside,
A tribute to the skill and dedication of Earth's industry and innovation.
Chapter 19. Mains cut in, hard, and Dekker gave himself up to the Force, just breathed the way one had to, and trusted, figuring at this point if the carrier hit a rock or took them to hell, he wasn't afraid anymore. He just stared at the blank, black VR in front of him, sensory deprivation. They were planning to fix that, arguing about what a crew wanted. Coming off hype, whether they wanted anything at all but a VR off the carrier's boards. But Dekker personally voted just for the vid of the carrier's surface. That was the only thing he wanted to see. He was convinced of it now. Only thing a rider crew was going to want was constant reassurance that they were snugged up against the frame and locked, and that the clanks that ran through the hull were the auto-service connections and the ordnance servos, ready to shove ordnance up into the racks if there were a need to launch the prototype a second time immediately, which, thank God, there wasn't, and the servos didn't. Tired now, just tired. The carrier pulsed down to system speeds and announced a reposition on a new vector. Slow as humans lived now, Dekker supposed, but things were moving faster than he could track or understand. Which was the universe at ordinary, Meg would say, if Meg was talking. But none of them seemed to have the energy to talk right now, just trying to ride through the breaking and not think, he supposed, all of them coming down off hype and exhausted. Second Excel. He made the deep, sustained breaths and shut his eyes. Black around them and black inside. Reality had caught up to him, and Corey was dead. Long time back. Another life. Pace the breaths and count, the way you had to with a shove like that, to keep conscious. Hot dogging from Baudry, as far as anybody could do with a mass like this.
What in hell's he doing? Ben asked plaintively. Where are we going? Going back to base, Meg said. You got readout? Yet, but you feel the direction, Rab. Come off the mystic stuff. Nobody feels the direction. Hey, there's ways and ways to feel it, Cher. We did it. Where else they got to take us? And there's those of us that feel the sun, those that live close to her. Hell if, Katie. Nothing mystic. We got magnetics. Science boys say so. That's shit. Dunno. But the sun's starboard by 15 and high by 5. Trez garbage, Katie. Hey, Trez mystique, Pollard. Could get us a comm link, Sal grumbled. Bloody damn hurry, they could let us come aboard. I got a serious bet on with Mitch's guys, and we're alive to collect. What did you bet?
Ben, alarmed. Familiar voices in the dark. He was safe here. Pori was outside. Pori who wanted him to make decisions, when Ben and Meg were the ones who decided. Exactly the way Graf said about merchanter crews, and he couldn't understand why Pori expected him to follow UDC rules. He didn't want the say. Just fly the ship, that was all, and he'd done that, hadn't he? He'd done the part he wanted, and for his part, he didn't care where they went from here, whether Meg was right or whether they were going to turn up somewhere out in real combat. He wanted to talk to Mitch and the guys, just a real quiet chance at the crews they'd worked with, chance to store it down, debrief, forget the things he'd been through. But that wasn't the way it worked. God, that was still to go through. The meds were going to haul them in and go over them with a microscope. And he'd gotten spoiled. He wanted the massage, the stand down, and the beer, and somebody else to make up his bunk. The kind of treatment you got on the carrier. That was what. He'd gotten spoiled. But the barracks was where he lived. He looked forward to mess hall automat cheese sandwiches. French fries and a hamburger and a shake. One thing Pori's fancy cooks couldn't come up with, not with the right degree of grease. You had to have things like that or you didn't know you were alive, and not in some passing dream. Eyes were watering, tear tracks running down his face. He didn't know why. He just listened to carrier ops, comm chatter between base ops and here, and traffic control. And Meg was right. They were routed in. Did it, he kept telling himself. The dark was proof of that. The feel of the ship was proof of that. He'd done what he wanted to do, the most outrageous thing he'd ever planned to do, and he didn't know what was left but to be free to do it. Didn't even have to teach now. Tape would do that. He just had to get it together for the next time they let him fly. We find, Graf said to the gathering of optexes, when we bring in an integrated crew, the sum of the one is reliably the sum of the rest. People in this profession, given the chance to pick their own partners, sort themselves. I don't know how otherwise to express it. You don't work with anybody under your ability, where you know your life is on the line. Yes, they're all four that good.
This crew is tape taught, a reporter said. What does that say about human skill?
Let me explain for any of you who are thinking of tape in the classic sense. The tape we're referring to is really the neural net record. You go in with what you did before, match to a performance you want, and the neural assist system shapes itself around you. That's why we work with just four people at this stage. They're physically programming the systems.
By their feedback.
Exactly. The tetralogics won't do what these people do. They brought instincts and experience no tape can teach. The experts and the computers all have to ask them what the right reaction is. That's what the tape is. That's all it's doing, recording and learning from the humans in control, storing all the responses as a norm some other human being just may exceed. The reporters liked that idea. You could see it in the mass mark that orders to the optex loops, the shouted questions, the sudden comprehension on their faces. They wanted a confirmation of themselves. That was what they wanted for their viewers. Another human yearning, a sense of sync with the chaos systems around them.
You're saying there's something unquantifiable, something about the human factor.
The human component governs the computers. That's the way it is in the starships. That's the only way this ship is going to do what it was created to do. That's what the whole design fight has been about, and that's what this cruise just proved. A vidbite they could use. The carrier was in dock. Presumably, the rider crew and the backups were on their way down, and the reporters were ready. He was theoretically the sacrifice, stalling and pacifying the reporters with running commentary. But damn, he'd scored a point. On the view screens and the monitors, images of Bonn and Paris and London, demonstrations by the Federation of Man and the leading peace groups, claiming Earth itself had been at risk. Never mind high V ordnance was aimed the other way. That same fear of near sea and system that discouraged the trade they might have had. People were frightened, stunned by the rapid approach. Reporters already asking, personal applications always chased a new idea, why they languished 3 days on a shuttle ride that the carrier could cover in 30 minutes. They had more questions. He saw the lift indicator showing operation and nodded in that direction. They're coming onto station. Attention deserted him. Bleh. Attention deserted him for the lift area. Marines and fleet security had an unbreachable line of athletic bodies setting up a clear area, through which VIII, on similar advisement, showed up with Tanzer and the senators in tow, trailed by a still ecstatic crowd of fleet and UDC crews from mission control. A complete media showout, Graf thought with an uneasy stomach. And damned Pori to bloody hell for the decision to come straight in. But what else was it all for, after all? Risk Dekker, risk the prototype, risk Eagle with its 1,000-member crew, for that matter, not to mention oversetting local regulations and stirring up the piecers with what they thought was a burning issue.
Lieutenant,
Tanzer arrived on his left hand. Colonel, we seem to have done it. Tanzer shot him a look as if he were weighing the courtesy "we" that he hadn't even considered in saying. The senators were in earshot. He delivered Tanzer an unintended, face-saving favor, and Tanzer looked as if he were trying to figure what he wanted in exchange.
We have done it,
Tanzer said, as the lift doors opened. Dekker and his crew walked out, still in their flight gear, all pale and tired-looking, but cheerful till they confronted the shockwave of reporters, questions, and optexes. Nobody, damn it, had even warned them what was waiting. Pori had let them walk into it. Graf dived forward, and the other core crews surged through and grabbed them, slapping backs and creating a small island of riot inside the cordon of security. Cordon of security. He hung back a little, let the crews have their moment. Saw Dekker both dazed and in good hands, the reporters not getting past the guards, just jostling silently for position with the optexes as he finally took his turn with the crew, shook hands, and congratulated them. There was glaze in their eyes. The four of them were still hyped and lost and not coping with the time flow. He knew the look. He felt it. He ached to insulate them from this, get them quiet and stability. "Good job," he said. "Good job, all of you." "Thank you, sir," Dekker breathed, and looked past him where, he turned his head, the vids showed riot in Bonn and Paris, just wide tracking, lost. "Ensign Dekker!" the reporters shouted. I'm slurring my speech. I must stop this. "Ensign Dekker, how do you feel right now?" Dekker turned his head to look at the reporter, honestly trying and failing, Graf read it, to accept one more slow-moving attention track. He began. A reporter said, "Ensign Dekker, there's a news crew standing by with a link to Bonn. Your mother's with the crew. Are you willing to speak to her? Tell her how you feel at this moment?" Damn, Graf thought, and shot another glance at the vids, where placards and banners called for peace, where a blonde woman with a look as lost as Dekker's gazed into the lenses, and then to the side, probably toward a monitor. "Talk to her," the reporter said. "You can talk. She'll hear you. Do you hear us, Ms. Dekker?"
Yes,
Ingrid Dekker said.
yes, I hear you.
"I hear you," Dekker said faintly, and the whole area shushed each other to quiet.
Paul, Paul, is that you?
"Yes." God, he was going to fracture. Graf saw the tears well up, saw the tremor. "Are you all right, Mother? Are they treating you all right?" Ingrid Dekker bit back tears.
I wanted to return your call.
"I wanted to call again. They said the lawyers wouldn't." Somebody shoved between Ingrid Dekker and the interviewer, said, "That's enough." "Let her alone!" Dekker cried. "Damn you, take your hands off her!" The picture jolted, the broad shadow of peace or security for a moment, Ingrid Dekker's voice crying,
Paul, Paul, I want to go home.
Katie got hold of Dekker. Abujib did. And Pollard did, on Optex. And Pollard said, on Optex, "Those sons of bitches." He's eloquent. "We'll see if we can get Ms. Dekker back on," the interviewer was saying, and addressed his counterpart in Bonn. "Can you get to Ms. Dekker to ask—" Dekker was in shock. Reporters shoving Optex pickups toward him, Marines under strict orders not to shove back. That face was magnified on monitors all around the area, pale and lost. Then Senator Caldwell's face was on the screens, reporters asking him his reaction. Caldwell said, gravely,
It's clear Miss Dekker had something more to say, and the Federation leadership didn't want her to say it. I see enough to raise serious questions about how free Miss Dekker is at the moment.
Serious questions, Graf thought, choking on his own outrage. Serious questions whether Pori's timing for noon in Bonn, where Mazian was there, with the peace demonstrators, was anything like coincidence. God, run the test right past Luna in a move the piecers were bound to protest, have the reporters set up, the questions primed, then send Dekker and a crowd of excited crews head on into the media for a reaction when Pori damned well knew he was spaced? He couldn't pull Dekker out directly, couldn't order security to oust the reporters, daren't look like censorship on this side of the issue. He went in, took Dekker's arm with optexes on high gain all around him. Someone will do something, which rang in his own ears as one more damned promise he didn't know how he was going to keep. Dekker gave him a bleak, blank stare. I don't want to leave, sir. If they can get her back, I want to talk to her. The mics got that, too. Katie said, out of turn,
They don't want to loose, that's clear.
but all that showed on the bond monitors was a shut wooden door and a reporter outside it, with no sound going out, talking, while demonstrators elbowed and shoved. And all that showed on theirs was Dekker's stricken face, Dekker saying, dazedly, They lied to her. They lied to her all the way. It's playing, Demas said, leaning against the counter. It's playing all over. It's playing over and over again, all round the planet, as the world wakes up. Dekker's a handsome kid, doesn't at all hurt his case. Or ours. Graf wanted to break something. Demas and Saito's necks, if he didn't recognize in Demas' glum expression an equal disgust. He looked at the vid, seeing Ingrid Dekker's bewildered distress, her son's "Let her alone!" over and over again. As a weapon, Ingrid Dekker had turned in the hands of her wielders and bit to the bone. Dekker was no longer the faceless belter exile. He was the pilot who'd pulled a spectacular success with the Hellburner. He was a kid with a human grievance and a mother held prisoner by causes and politicians. And the demonstration organizer who had shoved Ingrid Dekker away from the reporters was under heavy condemnation and refusing questions. Demas was right. It didn't hurt that Dekker had the face of a vid star and sincerity that came through the body language. The crew hadn't played badly either. The rumored split in the UDC fleet ranks. Ben Pollard with his UDC insignia on his flight suit, Katie and Abujib in flash and high tech, all of them profoundly concerned and angry at a human issue. While on the evening and morning news around the world, Alice Salazar was doing damage control, covering her partisans, claiming that the fleet had manipulated the media, truth, and that, quote, the important issues were being ignored in a rush to sympathy for a lying scoundrel who'd conned her daughter. Dekker might be seeing it. He'd ordered open media access for appearances' sake while reporters were here, if no other reason, and had no argument from Pori. The vid was going out all over the station, their local authority doing no screening whatsoever. Gigi, Demas said, honestly, I didn't know that they ordered me to take charge of security right when the test started. Until they ordered me to take charge of security right when the test started. They did query Saito early on for an assessment of Dekker's personnel record, his cultural makeup. They. What did the they? Did the captain know? I don't know what there is to know. My guess, Mazian sent Pori here to figure the odds. If it was good enough, go, shove the best team in the ship and make the run. And if it turned out to be Dekker, meet the political chaff head on, no hiding it. Aim him straight for the cameras, and damn all Salazar could do. Pardon me, Nav, but the hell the timing was random. High noon in Europe, in Bonn. Mazian's there. He knows the schedule. He knew it would draw instant fire. I don't think he planned the scene with Dekker's mother. I don't put it past him. I think you give him too much credit. Some things just drop into your lap. But Mazian did want the protests, according to Saito. He wanted to solidify the issue, Saito says, so it has substance, and then shoot that substance to hell. Make the PCers take a specific position and prove them wrong. Dekker's mother. Dekker's mother is a side issue, an opportunity I'm sure they'll take advantage of. Not mentioning Salazar, the EC wants Salazar stopped in such a way it won't break Mars out of the Union. And we have the Kent business with Marscorp's fingerprints all over it. And we daren't use it, damn it! We daren't even arrest Kent and Booton! We don't know. A stray thought crossed his mind. What? Demas asked in his silence. Don't know what? He leaned back in his chair and looked at the vid, where another instant opinion poll was playing. A radical shift in the numbers in the last 5 hours, plus or minus 3 points of accuracy. People believed the things they'd seen. 45% believed Paul Dekker was innocent, and 46% now believed there was a significant threat of the war reaching Earth. He said to Demas, apropos of nothing previous, I want a statement prepared, a public relations version of Dekker's file, in case. I don't like unanticipateds, Nav. You've got it, but the company will blackhole it. Salazar is too sensitive an issue, and far too powerful. She's using the issues. She's not the grieving mother. She's a politician, Kent. Oh, I thought that was a comma. Whoops. She's a politician. Kent has got to be professional. And if we've got him, there'll be others. Inside the Earth Company offices, for all we know. All the same, he said. He offered Demas a thin smile, and Demas took himself and his security briefcase back to the carrier to Saito, to whatever lines of communication they were using to reach the captain with or without Mazian's knowledge. They knew now what had killed Wilhelmsen. Ben Pollard had put them onto it, and Pori's question to Dekker had shown it plain as plain. Wilhelmsen had been UDC command track. Pete Fowler had been the shadow behind Dekker's status, the real decision maker, and the UDC had put them into the same cockpit. But they couldn't put that story in the release to the media. They dared not confuse the issue. Dekker was the point man, what had Saito said? The face the public knew? Dekker was the command officer of record in both crews, and that was the way the story was going to Earth. Himself, he put on his jacket and went to evening rec, where there was a general liberty in force, with most of the reporters packed in with the senators on the shuttle, about 6 hours distant from the crews, thank God. Thanks to some other agency, he was trapped with 8 of them on station for at least a week, and damned if he was going to deal with them blind. Beer and vodka were permissible, and Mitch and the UDC's Deke Chapman were doing a VIII arcade game, noisy and rude, with bets down and the Marine Guards in on it, when a command officer walked in on it unannounced. Graf, Meg said. The whole room drew a breath, seemed to decide it was a friendly tour, and went back to an abated roar. Vasquez offered the lieutenant a beer. Sip, Graf said, in the way of a shepherd who was on duty. So Graf got his sip to a cheer from all about, then said, quietly, Pollard, word with you. Outside. Quick frown from Sal. No trouble, Graf said. Just an operational. As you were, everybody. Jokes on that score. No disrespect at all. Just guys on an R&R from death and destruction. Meg slid into her chair again, caught Deck's hand, because he was looking spaced again. Let down. She understood that. Only thoroughly happy moment he'd had in his life, by all she knew, and they'd hit him head on with that business with his mother and the piecers. He looked her in the eyes now as if she had the answers. As if, as the Rab would say, she was the word and the know-how. And maybe she had been that once, for a lot of people. Maybe she'd been more, once, than she ever let on to those who checked on those and maybe she'd been more once than she'd ever let on to those who checked in on such things. But the generations changed. The whole human race spun and raced toward tomorrow after tomorrow, and if you were 25 now, you didn't know the Rab that had been the young and the foolish and the seekers after personal truth. The Rab is, they used to say. after the company man had said, "No dealing with the rabble. The rab is, and the rab will be, and screw the corp." Was it lover or her personal tomorrow? Looking into her eyes and hanging on the words. "She'll get out," she told him, because she knew it was his mama he was brooding about, and maybe Corey. He didn't have many tracks left when he got this far down. She hit his arm and said, "Rab is and Rab does, June Fee. And they shot us down. Don't forget that. Shot you down. I got nothing to teach you about being screwed." "She never cared about politics, Meg." "We got to do, June Fee. Life is, death is, and that's all. But we're here, and they got to deal with that. They got to deal with us." Deck had been a kid when the rab had lost its innocence, and the blood had run on the company steps. Severely young, Deck still was, in some ways. She couldn't be, again. And she told it cold and plain as she'd learned it herself. "There's no luck, June Rab. Things don't brute happen for no damn reason. You aren't it. Forgive, Cher. But nobody at this table, not me and not you and not Sal, is that important. That God is going to screw up somebody else's life to get to you. I don't know who, I don't know why, but we've eliminated God as a suspect." Deck managed a laugh, a grin, and picked up his beer with his hand shaking. He drank a sip without spilling it. At least. "Hey," Sal said, "they got a whole UN Human Rights Commission asking to talk to your mama." "But if they get her out, she's not safe. Salazar's people tried twice to kill me and got Jamil." "Cher, Reb, are they going to risk stirring things up now? They got their ass on the line. They want quiet soon as they can hush this up. When the corp rats get caught, they always want a real quick silence." He let go a sigh, shook his head. Sal elbowed him. "Take you on, Cher? Billiards or poker?" Poker it was. Ben pulled a chair back, set his beer down, said cheerfully, "Deal me in," and collected looks from his crewmates. He kept the smugness off his face. The reason was for Sal's ears, for Dekker and Meg once the stuff went public. As would happen, he was sure, when security found out what to do with the file that had landed in their laps. Dekker asked, "What did they want?" "Oh, nothing." "Come on," Sal said. "Go," Ben said, just picking up his cards. "Just a little techie stuff." Good hand it was. There were nights a guy was on, and this was it. Damn, there was stuff going to hit the news tomorrow. "Techie stuff, hell," Sal said. "What was it?" "Just a little advice." And access numbers, and a nail polish sealed card. He laid down chips. Didn't have to go to Stockholm to prove the statin tech over the damned EI-DAT. Damn no. Elegant equipment they had on that carrier. "What advice?" He smiled, thinking about the morning news, and MarsCorp, and Salazar's personal memo file, and the wonderful, damning things it held. "Don't buy stock in EI-DAT, Lendler, or MarsCorp, even at discount." "What have you got?" Dekker asked sharply. Wider smile. "A winning hand, Deck boy. Odds are, a winning hand." And that was Hellburner by C.J. Cherryh. Narrated to you by moi, myself, Fregath. Any errors, stutters, and damages to the original narrative are mine and mine alone. Hope people enjoyed. I certainly did. And hey, look at that, a happy ending, more or less. Um, if you consider that the ending, which I do. Um, Closing thoughts. It's a good book, okay? You should read it. You should also read the previous novel, Heavy Time. If you haven't listened to that, I have that up there. There is, I know, an omnibus edition, which I have portrayed as the cover image for this episode, called Devil to the Belt. It's got both of them in there if you don't want to buy them as separate books. Um, I'm going to shill ABE books or your local library at this point. Actually, yeah, let's shill your local library. Check your local library to see if they have a copy. Definitely read it. Um, if they don't have the omnibus, see if they've got either of the individual ones. One of the things I like is how well planned out this book is as a sequel, and how it works with as it does going forward. What does need to be noted is I believe Down Below Station was written before this. So they have, or so CJ Cherryh has the advantage of knowing where things are going to end up while also working with something so completely different and completely separate that it winds up working. One of the things I like about this as a sequel to Heavy Time is how like particularly, and it's really clear right at the end, it's like, okay, everybody and what they're good at is in their place. They do what they're absolutely best at. Meg is great at taking the long view and coming up with overall decisions. um Sal's hot-blooded and aggressive, on a hair trigger, so she's good at guns, I guess. um Dekker's an ace pilot. He's extremely good at what he does. You give him a course and he'll do it. um Ben Pollard is a techie, and he does his techie thing super well. So he's on the arms comp and all that. And it's like, okay, this is all kind of established character stuff from even before they were taking tape. This is stuff from like the first book. These are all character traits that are inherent in them from the jump. Um, and it just like it blossoms and flowers here, and this is like payoff for that. It's using those character traits in a way that's kind of roundabout initially and then perfectly clear later. It's pretty brilliant. We also kind of low key, maybe or maybe not, learn something rather detailed about Meg Katie's background in the RAB and how not only we knew she was involved in the RAB movement. I think that was fairly clear. Um, but she was. It's. I think the implication, and I could very well be wrong on this. I'd have to ask CJ Cherryh or somebody who's read the book more often than me or has a better working knowledge of the overall verse at this point in the timeline. I believe the implication is that Meg Katie was, I should say, part of the RAB leadership, or at least fairly important to the RAB cause. Certainly, she got up to some antics. Certainly, she was there when the shots were fired on the EarthCorp steps, or at least adjacent, near enough to the problem to be very cognizant of it. Um, Now that I think is the implication. I might be wrong, and that's fine. That's my personal take coming to the fore. So yeah, I hope people dug it. I think it's great. I think it's a fascinating character study. That's really what I like best about CJ Cherryh is her character studies are absolutely phenomenal. Is You do have a bunch of sci-fi that's usually the pulpy stuff is going to be like, oh, here's this fancy technology and what do people do with it? And this is kind of like taking that to a pretty far logical extreme, um, in what I feel is a kind of similar way, world building wise and consistency wise, as Frank Herbert did, particularly with the Dune series, where yes, there's all sorts of technological ramifications and punctuation. No, don't remind me. She uses the whole buffalo in terms of punctuation. Oh, I didn't have. Let me flip through here, see if I can find a passage that's got all of it in there. None of them tripped me up all that badly. There's just some really long borderline run-on sentences. That one just doesn't have a lot of punctuation. That one's hard for that reason. Um, Come on. There's got to be one with at least one ellipsis in here. Ellipsis and a semicolon. That's all I'm looking for is an ellipsis and a semicolon. She doesn't abuse ellipses. It's easy to do that. She does not. She uses them fairly sparingly, but okay, I say as I find a passage with three of them. Three of them as half of the punctuation in this is commas, half of it is ellipses. That's fascinating. Anyway, yes, I'm a big CJ Cherryh fan. I'm a fanboy. Fight me. Eventually, I may do a read through of. There was one in the Sim. There was a semicolon in the Sim. There surely was. And an ellipsis and a washer. That washer. I lost my train of thought. I will eventually probably get around, probably more, I'll insert adverb here, get around to later novels in the Merchant or Union universe. I think that's what it's called. Or is it Alliance Union? Shit, I don't remember. Wikipedia, CJ Cherryh. What are you? Rule mailing, major themes, blah, 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 blah. Where's that bibliography? Give me that bibliography page. Thank you. Alliance Union. Thank you. Alliance Union. Um, Ones I'll probably get to. Uh, Probably Merchanter's Luck I'll get to. Down Below Station is so goddamned important that I sort of have to, but it's kind of a beefy book. It's not super long. Like I think in terms of page count, it's a bit longer than this one, but not by a lot, I guess. But it's very dense. There's a lot going on in Down Below Station. Um, I mean, wow, there's a lot going on in Down Below Station, and it's like, let's see. So you get the payoff for Fleet from these books. You get the payoff for Fleet there, even though it was written a couple years. Yeah, okay, so I knew someone who pays attention was going to be like, hold up, Dune technology, excuse me? Um, I knew someone was going to do this. Give me a minute, give me a minute, give me a minute. Let me finish my current thought. So Down Below Station is incredibly dense. There's a lot going on. You've got the sociology and how people are going to be a bit different on, and just like kind of an overview of living on a space station that isn't around Earth. You're going to have dealing with other sentient life that isn't human. There are aliens in the Alliance Union universe. So there's denizens on Pell and kind of their social interactions with themselves and with human beings. There's, let's see, the interaction between station life and merchanters. There's the pressure coming from outside from Union, basically with people on stations and as merchanters kind of being crushed between a rock and a hard place between Union, their own interests, and Earth being like, hey, you know what? We don't like how everybody is. We don't like how people aren't paying fealty, and you get a really good overview on how outmoded Earth viewpoints are in this book in particular. There's a lot of that coming mostly from Graph, where Graph is just like, how can these people think that this? How can these people think these things? That's got no bearing on reality. Nobody cares. Nobody's gonna blow up your planet. That'd be dumb. We don't do that out there. We're not crazy. Probably. Union is weird because Union is a point of fear because Union is very different because they are populating. They're doing big terraforming pushes. They're populating with, these, grown out of test tube people. Everybody's freaked out about Union, and for reasonably good cause. So down below station is extremely dense, and getting to that will be something I get to later. I'll have to get to it before I get to Rim Runners. I don't think I have to get to. Oh, shoot. I might have to do that before I do Merchanter's Luck, too. I'm trying to remember when that takes place. Because I think there are there's definitely allusions to the difference between Union and other stations. It's tough. So it's dense, is what I'm saying. And the character studies are crazy. Um, and I know I mangled a lot of what I read in these two, and I'm apologizing for that because part of it is I'm reading this on the fly, and like I'm not reading the chapter immediately before I start reading it, which would probably be a really good idea. Duh. These are being done live. This is more like an entertaining blind read exercise, partially blind read, in that I've read all these books before, but I haven't read them necessarily in, say, years. So I'm working off memory to get things right. And CJ Cherryh, for reading aloud, is not forgiving of this at all. Because CJ Cherryh writes for pretty high reading level. So you can't just be like, oh, well, this is how the sentence is probably going to flow. It's like, no, she's going to interrupt that sucker. She's going to interrupt it 3 times with commas, semicolons, and the works. And if you are just trying to like remove your conscious brain interface and have your eyes read it and your mouth say it, you're gonna have a hard time because it's just not gonna be easy or natural to do because it's not easy or natural to read, and that's good. Okay, so let's spiral back to why I think there's reasonable comparisons between CJ Cherryh and the Alliance Union universe and Frank Herbert. Let's get back to that. Um, Now, I'm also a diehard Frank Herbert fan. Coming up in the next month or two, I want to start reading Under Pressure, which is completely unrelated with anything, any of his Dune work or any of his other stuff, because it's fun, it's short, and it's cool. We'll get there. So there's a degree of consistency and background work that both CJ Cherryh and Frank Herbert clearly did in terms of thinking through what they've done and what those books stand to show about not so much human interactions with, say, technology or human interactions with a setting, but with the much broader sociological ramifications of humans interacting with technology, concepts, or setting. And like most authors aren't working on that scale. They're really not working on that scale. Usually you're going to have and this isn't a bash against other science fiction authors who are more traditionally science fiction-y, who are going to do what I consider like classic sci-fi in quotes, being here is person group, here is technological change or gizmo or whatever. How do people interact with that? How do people slap against that? How do they bounce off? Or setting, usually brought about in a science fictional fashion. Usually that's your typical like B level if you're going to give them ratings or tiers. Science fiction. Your bog standard sci-fi is going to be here's this cool idea. How does one bounce off of this? Whereas CJ Cherryh and Frank Herbert take take that concept and then be like, let's bounce them off that, but bounce them off that going down the road, 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 down the road. Way like in the case of Dune, literally tens of thousands of years removed. Or in the case of like the gap between Children of Dune and God Emperor of Dune, 3,000 ish. It's either 3 or 4,000 years. It's around there. It's multiple millennium. Um, and seeing and just like kind of here's payoff of ideas we introduced in a universe back 3,000 years ago and how we're paying that off. Whereas CJ Cherryh, it's a bit of it's a tighter time scale, That's maybe one of my only complaints in consistency about the Alliance Union universe is we're given like this general, oh, we couldn't move it faster than light until we could, and then we could, and time scale speeds up, but like it doesn't always feel consistent because to me it feels like a little too close to say the year 2000 because these are happening in like the year, geez, I don't remember now, 20, like these are happening in like 22, 20, between 22 and 2500 AD. Like this is close-ish. Where are you? 20. Okay, so down below station happens in 2353. I was smart. I was right. Um, 22, 2352, 2353. And I'm just kind of like, so you're traveling light years at whatever speeds you're traveling light years in to set up stations. Wouldn't that have taken and then back before all this has happened? And it's like enough time for this stuff to percolate and society to develop, and enough of, and I'm just like, I feel like another like couple hundred years would have been perfect, and it all syncs up perfectly in my brain. And that's the only thing I don't jive with quite, is I'm like, it's a little too close to home. But then all you have to really do is be like, just assume it's a alternate history, and we started doing different space development earlier, and it's fine probably. And that's okay. These were written in the 80s into the 90s for the most part. Okay, I've rambled. What was I rambling on? I had connective tissue here. Oh, yes, yes. So talking about the whole generation thing and going down the line generationally, and how those ramifications affect different generations. There is CJ Cherryh has like a book that codifies kind of her style in that regard, long term uh, ramifications of either a technological concept or setting or all of that in the broader social context. And that is 40,000 at Gehenna, which isn't technically required reading for Cytine to read the book Cytine, but it's a good idea because it becomes real important for late Cytine and like the entirety of the book Regenesis, um, which is a direct sequel to Cytine. And what that book deals with is colonizing a planet and kind of kind of like oh my gosh, I can't believe I just forgot the author's name. The author who did Red Mars, Blue Mars, Green Mars. Shit, 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 shit. Oh, the name is on the tip of my tongue, and I would go and dig out my copies of the books, but they're buried behind other books, and I'm not going to do that right now because I'd have to take off my headset and all that. Right now, I'm super super jazzed for actually finishing the book, so I'm rambling like crazy, and I apologize. Anybody who wants to tune out at this point, I should have told you like half an hour ago. You can tune out now. I'm going to ramble for a while. In any case, 40,000 at Gehenna is awesome, and I will get around to reading that. What 40,000 at Gehenna does is it kind of it codifies a lot about how the Azzy behave when left to their own devices without supervision. And that's the entire point. Like it's you learn a lot. Like there's I can't do spoilers because there's spoilers abound. Like this touches on things that become spoilery for stuff I want to read later. Suffice it to say, it's good and you should check it out and read it. Okay, I've said my piece. Next week I'll be doing short stories of some kind or stripe. I don't know what yet. Probably reading from Interzone from like decades past or something. As I'm wont to do. That and astounding science fiction. I've got a reasonable archive of those put together, so I tend to read for them those for the short story stuff. The week after that, I don't think I'm going to be here. Right, I'm not going to be here, and I'm not going to be here. I don't think the beginning of the month either. The beginning of next month either. I'm gone about 2 weeks. So you'll be on break for then. But then I plan on doing um, getting into another novel. Probably it will be Under Pressure by Frank Herbert. It might not be because I'm also kind of looking at doing Armor by what's his name? Stakely. Stakely? Stakely, right? John Stakely? John Stakely, yes. Which is kind of like if you took Starship Troopers and then like removed the stuff that everybody gets kind of upset about now, uh, about certain potential messaging there, which you can agree with or not agree with. Uh, I, for one, am not going to stick my toe into that particular game at this point right now. Uh, I've done Heinlein before. I've had slight snarky asides about the incredibly naive optimism of certain libertarian outlooks, but that's just me.
I think this shit works great in a vacuum. It's lovely. It's a lovely ideal to believe that people will never try to screw the system, but they always will, Cher. They will always do so, June Rab. They will always screw the system for their own personal gain. I'd love it if everybody could be trusted to have a gun. That'd be fantastic. They can't. People are fucking animals. Okay? And they're going to do stupid shit. Period. I'm not pro authoritarianism. That's fucked for a million reasons. All right, so I've virtue signaled, I guess. But suffice it to say, before I read Armor, I kind of have to read Starship Troopers so you know what Armor is bouncing off of. So I'll probably do that. Um, but I also want to do a read through of Starfish. And I want to do something by Jeff Vandermeer. Shit. So yeah, I've got a lot on my plate right now. I'm dealing with a lot. And the stuff I want to read is, I mean, uh, it's taken me this many decades to accumulate and read the stuff that I've got. And reading it aloud takes about 5 times as long as me reading it solo. So you do the math. If I've got how many walls? One, two, call that four, I guess. It's a lot of books, okay? I have a passion. It is the written word. Anyway, where was I? Right. Right. So the tech levels in Dune and how it's actually medieval kind of. Yeah, we'll talk about that when I read Dune. You heard it here, folks. You heard it here first. Frag just made a big commitment. It was a mistake, but he committed. Don't worry, I won't be reading that Brian Herbert shit. Sorry. Sorry. They're not bad. They're just pulpy. I don't know. Like Kevin J. I've had this rant before. Kevin J. Anderson and how he's a great like fan fiction author, but I don't really respect him as much as I do, say, Frank. It's also an impossible act to follow. Like following Frank Herbert, no, no, it can't be done. It just can't. You can't do it. So like he's already set up to disappoint for me personally. Um, I dig that you can have fun with them. I've had fun with them. Like the that 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 prequel trilogy, the two prequel trilogies that are a lot of fun. The House Harkonnen, Atreides, Carino, and then what was it? Butlerian Jihad, Machine Crusade, and Battle of Corin. I think I probably got the order wrong. I don't actually remember. Those are cute. The post chapter house stuff never really stuck with me because it starts feeling even more fan fiction. It's like, well, what if we had a no ship sailing out to the edges of the universe and it had the entire cast of Dune? And I'm like, Muad'Dib's there talking to Leto too, or whoever, and I'm just like, oh my god, guys, please, no.
Stop! Quit while you're ahead! That sort of like I'm actually developing tears thinking about it. I'm just like, no. No. Again, I don't hate them. I don't hate that other people like them. I think they're fun. But you cannot get me to take them as seriously as I do Dune through definitely Dune through God Emperor, but Dune through Chapter House. It's just you can't do it. You cannot make me take them seriously. I've tried. I have tried. I've been invested in that for so damn long. I've tried. I am really just going on today. I am so sorry. It's been a long week. And this is like my last bit of release before I have to go back into it again. So yeah, expect probably under pressure after in like 3 weeks, and then yeah, shit. But yeah, I was looking at doing under pressure and like some nautical sci-fi basically is kind of what I was looking at doing. So I was like, oh yeah, I could do Starfish. That's got like deep sea diver stuff. That'll be cool. I could do all the follow-ups to that, like Beta Hemoth and whatever the other one was. Maelstrom. I could do something by Jeff Vandermeer. That's not really nautical science fiction, but it's by the seaside. That counts, right? 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 Yeah, we explore tide pools. Um, if you're acquainted with Jeff Vandermeer and any of his work, tide pools come up with some frequency. It's kind of like Peter Watts and the word aliquots. You'll see them. They're going to show up. You're going to have the word aliquot in a Peter Watts novel. I don't think I've ever asked him in the comments section of his blog. It's like, what is with you and the word aliquots? I want to know. I like it, but man, you use it with frequency. It's right. You're using the right word, but man, it's uncanny. Um, yeah. And CJ Cherry with all the punctuation, every single piece of the punctuation buffalo. Oh yes, even the little quotes inside the big quotes. I haven't seen her do brackets within parentheses that I can recall offhand. That's the order, right? It goes parentheses, and then if you're doing a parentheses statement within parentheses, it's the bracket. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I can't remember a specific instance where she's done that, but if you're having to do that, you should probably find another way to format the context of what you're saying to make it comprehensible. All right, that's it from me. I've talked long enough. Thanks to everybody who tuned in, and to everybody who's watching this all the way to the end. Golly, you have the patience of insert religious figure here who got put through it, or really anyone. You've got the patience of somebody who's patient, very patient. You've got the patience of an implacable intelligence beyond our ken. There we go. That's a compliment, right? Yeah. So thanks. I do this every Friday except for 2 Fridays after next week. The dates that I won't be here. I will not be here for the 29th or the 5th. Actually, if I'm perfectly honest, I may not be here for next week, depending on how things go. My God, you're still here. Go get some sleep or eat lunch or I've got to eat lunch. I'm starving, dude. Um, I'm tired. I'm hungry. Y'all have fun. I try to do this every week. And yeah, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for watching it after the fact. And feel free to catch me live. AE Optical Antenna is doing so. Is that AE or A? Because it's that combined, conjoined uh, A optical antenna conjoined letter that you see in occasional texts and languages. Anyway, thanks for tuning in. Stay safe, stay sane. Sorry for ranting and offending whatever little fraction of my viewer base exists. I know people got upset when my cat like interrupted me reading Snow Crash, so anything I do since then is pretty much gonna bounce. If they haven't unsubscribed by now, then absolutely nothing will. um, or they just don't care. I don't know. If you want to like and subscribe, go ahead, but I'm not going to tell you to do it. Like, have fun. Um, I don't make money off this, obviously. If I did, I'd take it seriously. I do take it seriously, just not that way. Um, you'll also things you'll never Ash. I'm driving Ash. Cool. Be careful. Don't crash. Please. Please. You're like one of the people who tunes in every time. Don't die. Okay? Thanks. So yeah, stay safe, stay sane, stay safe, and be decent to each other. Alrighty, that's it from me. It's supposed to look like an antenna. You know, it actually does look like an antenna. Shit. I never got that. Pardon my French. I should stop saying that. That's a really bad reflexive tick that I have. I have got to stop doing that. Yeah, no, it does. Yeah. Things in my world are making sense now. Everything is coming together. It is culminating in a grand expression of, I don't know. Man, I should read some. No, for we're done. We're done for today. See ya. Thanks again.